All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jenna. I am the program coordinator here at the Long Beach Island Foundation. Darlene Cavalier, one of our co-hosts, will be hopping on shortly. But I did want to briefly introduce Ben Wurst. He is our senior wildlife biologist at Conserve Wildlife Foundation. Of course, very popular and always active with the foundation as well. Ben, I'll let you take the lead. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Jenna, for that introduction. Great to be here with you all. Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, it's not me. Everybody wants to hear about these pretty amazing raptors, right? So this talk I put together more so as an alternative to previous talks you may have heard me give with the foundation and in other locations, more so just, talking about ospreys and their relationship with their prey. And, a little bit about me. So I've worked with ospreys for over 20 years in New Jersey. I started out working for the Division of Fish and Wildlife in the Endangered Species Program. So many people think like, okay, I must work for the government because I work with ospreys. Well, over the years, I began working more so with Conserve Wildlife Foundation, and that's where I've worked for over the past 15 years. And with Conserve Wildlife, we really are in a unique position where we bring in private funding to support our work to monitor and manage ospreys in New Jersey with emphasis on their nesting structures. I've installed over 200 nest platforms for ospreys and maintained many more. And, when I first started working with ospreys, I really had no idea what they ate. We basically went out and conducted surveys to assess the overall health of the population. So this is where we visit nests to look at their outcome and determine how many young they have and whether or not they are productive. But it's been in more recent years where, obviously we've seen some issues with their outcomes at nests, which makes us look at many different factors that would basically, affect their outcomes. And really one of those that's a leading contributor is prey, right? Because ospreys are fish obligates, meaning that about 99% of their diet consists of fish. And in New Jersey, we know that given our location along the coast, that Atlantic menhaden are really one of their primary prey species. And we know this from seeing, prey remains brought to nests and also prey that they're photographed with. Even right now is a really cool time of year when we have a lot of spawning fish in our rivers that they're foraging on. But, menhaden really make up the core of their prey during the peak of their nesting season, which is June and July. So this talk, I kind of framed it as a way to learn more or to educate the public about this fish because many people don't know about it, even like I did back, in the early 2000s. So that's I'm going to talk a little bit about their history, their life cycle, life history, and current management of the species because they are a very valuable commercial species in New Jersey and all along the Atlantic coast. So Atlantic menhaden, they're a forage fish, so they're commonly seen on the surface of water in this position like this, where they're actively feeding while they're swimming. And with that, they're found all along the coast. They're a fish of many names. Most people are familiar with the term bunker. So that's one of their names because they're used as a bait fish, but they're also called pogies. But they're, like I said, they're forage fish, so they're filter feeders. That means that they're filtering the water as they swim. And these fish have a largely forked tail. They're silver, they're dark from above and light from below, giving them protection from predators, like most other fish are colored that swim through the water column, but they're found in very dense schools, a lot of times right on the surface of the water, especially during the summer months when ospreys would forage on them. And, that's our, when you read more about this fish and a great book by Bruce Franklin, that's called The Most Important Fish in the Sea, is you really learn about these fish and how the history of them and how they're really lucky to live even a couple years because of just how they're that just because of their role in the ecosystem, where they're basically taking plankton that they're feeding on and then converting that into proteins and oils that many other species are eating. So it's lucky for them to live very long before getting eaten. All right, but yeah, so they're found all along the coast and they're highly migratory. So that's where given the time of year, that's where they could be anywhere along the coast. We've seen some effects from climate change where, fish are trending more northward from our warming waters. But yeah, so they spawn at any given time of year, all along the coast. Typically in New Jersey, we see more spawning, as you can see, on the right off of our coast in summer, and then more so as they move northward in the warmer or later parts of summer, and then back south again, where most populations are found off of the Carolinas in the winter months. But we've also there's been some studies with fisheries showing that they also winter down in deeper waters as well, even off of Cape May as well. But they do spawn out in the ocean, and that's where young, after they hatch, they do feed on mostly zooplankton. So that's where the little young of the year feed mostly on zooplankton. And then as adults, they transition to feed more on phytoplankton, which is different than other fish in the herring family, where they mainly specialize in feeding on zooplankton. All right. And that's where our estuaries, like the Delaware Bay, Barnegat Bay, Chesapeake Bay, are really crucial nurseries for these juvenile fish as they grow up. And that's where they play a role as for filter feeders in many lagoons. I'm sure if some of you are from like Long Beach Island, familiar with like Kinsey Cove, and other locations just on the bay, you see these schools of peanut bunker, as they're called, in the bay where they're foraging on a lot of phytoplankton during this very productive time of year, where then they're growing up and eventually leaving the bay to meet with the adults and then, again, moving with the schools south for the winter and then back north again. All right. So, and that's where, the larger the individual as well, for females, the more eggs they can lay as well. So they could lay, around 300,000 eggs as a mature adult that's about 12 to 15 inches, whereas smaller adults, of course, only produce about 30,000 eggs, so much less than more older uh, individuals. All right, so this fish, as a forage fish, they play this really critical role in our marine environments where they create this bridge from our vast energy reserves that we find in the plankton in the ocean and then convert that into food for our top tier predators, many that are commercially viable or have great value in the ecosystem. So that includes many other species throughout the world and really one of the most exploited fisheries as well are forage fish throughout the world. But menhaden specifically have very high lipid counts, which makes them very a great energetic source of food for predators like whales, ospreys, eagles, loons, and tuna, and other commercially important species too, like striped bass and bluefish. So besides that, I mean, there's a lot of stakeholder interests, involved with menhaden and their management. Of course, they're commercially viable, but also very important for recreational fisheries as well for the many fishermen who go out and catch fish along the coast. So, there's much, economic impacts from having a reduced number or a depleted stock of them within, nearshore waters when you look at commercial and, so bait fisheries inshore and also recreational fisheries as well. And that's where, many of those top tier species, like our whales, if there aren't adequate, stocks of this fishery on inshore waters or near shore waters, then, many of these whales are not, they don't thrive in these areas or they're not found. And ospreys, are another species where then they have to switch and, try to catch other prey that may not be as plentiful as menhaden would be. And yeah, so also, recreational fishing, could also be impacted as well, depending on, the stocks of these fish at any given time of year along their range during the fall, especially when the striper run is happening as well. So now we'll kind of go back. It was really fun kind of putting together some of these slides just about menhaden, some many of you are probably familiar with their use. Historically, it was used as fertilizer, where fish were directly placed right in, beds used for farming, specifically to grow corn. This is where Native Americans taught our early settlers here, our colonists, how to use this to grow corn successfully. And corn was used, as even as currency back in the day. And, really colonists who came here found it really tough. And without this local knowledge, they actually found it to be very difficult to survive here, especially in the winters. So menhaden really played this critical role back then, to allow settlers to be able to establish homes and, farm the land. But at the time, they also saw that fish were just so plentiful that, you can, just see very, very dense schools of many different species of forage fish along the coast, which could be caught in very large quantities and even very easily, even with dip nets. Some even remarked of just sticking a pot in the water and you would come out with fish. And some of the earliest methods were using seines along shorelines for fishing, and then they transitioned to using pound nets, which I'm sure if any of you, living along the coast, and if you've been to like a maritime museum, you've seen displays of pound nets or photos of this type of fishery where fishermen put poles in the ocean and ran nets in them, where then fish were then, they then got trapped in these nets and then they were harvested by boat, which were then assisted sometimes even with, horses and everything. And then those fish were landed right on the coast and brought to markets in Philadelphia and New York via railroad and everything. And then as more of this demand for fish grew, and specifically oil from menhaden, then the fishery really expanded. And this really happened, right around the Industrial Revolution, as the demand for oil increased and whaling became more difficult and more deadly. So that's where more fish factories were built along the Atlantic coast. There were as many as 20 reduction fisheries or menhaden, fish factories, and this is where the fish were cooked, where then the meal was separated from oils, and the oil was used for many industrial purposes, from lighting to lubricants and everything. And, in New Jersey, we had several fish factories. If any of you have been to Great Bay Boulevard or Seven Bridges Road, you could see the remnants of the Fish Island, factory out there, or sorry, Crab Island out there. But yeah, so the fishery really grew exponentially as, vessels became better at, getting out to these fishing areas with steam engines as opposed to sail originally, and the market really expanded. But then at some point, it came to contract. This is right around the Depression, but also as the fishing industry expanded and the stock became overfished and contracted very greatly. And this also, right around this time by the 1950s, a lot of development was happening along the coast of New Jersey, right around when the harvest peaked, and, a lot of these fish factories closed. And that's no one really wanted to live by a fish factory or a stink house, right? As some of them were called, like the one down there in Little Egg Harbor. But as you could see in the chart there, just showing the overall harvest of menhaden, how it went down from the 1960s. And this is really when ospreys were in decline all throughout New Jersey during that time as well. But yeah, so as landings dropped, these fish factories closed because they weren't able to sustain the catch, and basically it collapsed to the point where there's only one industrial reduction plant left for menhaden, and that's located in Reedville, Virginia. And in New Jersey, we actually banned, the industrial fishing of menhaden in 2002. So that means it can only happen in federal waters and not state waters, which is out to 3 nautical miles. So if you're wondering how menhaden are caught for the reduction fishery, basically they use very large purse seines that are, uh, you know, uh, basically broadcast by purse boats. They're launched from a mothership, which is aided by spotter planes that fly along the coast looking for schools of this fish. And then they target those schools and broadcast the purse seine around the school, where then uh, a winch is used to basically haul in the net, trapping the fish, and then the boat goes up and retrieves the fish with a pump, where then they bring it on board and then back to port, where then it's processed. All right, so what we do with this fish, all right, this fish when it's commercially harvested, it's harvested for bait. So that's the whole form of this fish, which is used for both the lobster industry, crab industry, and just as chum, just because of the oils make this fish very, very irresistible to predators in the ocean. But it's also turned into meal, which is one of the main products, and that's basically used for food for both for feeding livestock and pet food, but also it's increased for use in aquaculture, and that's for the farmed fish industry. And one of the main fish that's grown is Atlantic salmon. All right, so that's where a lot of this meal is used to create that. And actually, even worldwide, just a couple of years ago, we transitioned from eating more wild caught fish to more farmed raised fish overall. So the demand for this is definitely not going to be going down anytime soon. All right, so the management of menhaden, basically, they are a commercial species. They're managed by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. This is where there's a management board that oversees the total allowable catch for menhaden. Before 2012, there was no coastwide, total allowable catch or TAC. So after that, that's when they actually established a limit for the fishery to be able to harvest. And that's where every couple of years they go through and revisit the total allowable catch. And this is by looking at mainly data from the fishery. So there's no real coastwide, survey of the abundance of biomass using, like an aerial survey. It's done through stock assessments using data from the fishery and the landings that are reported. All right. So really one of the most recent changes, which has been to basically allow more fish to stay in the ocean, was the adoption of ecological reference points. This is where they take in data from other fisheries, mainly striper and weakfish, to help guide the stock assessments. But if we look at ospreys and how that data is used in that aspect, the ecological reference points, they do not actually use osprey nest outcomes in many areas or basically all areas. They don't use actual outcomes from osprey nests in their assessment. So the current management, basically, if any of you are really familiar with this, the total allowable catch was just reduced last year because the prior assessment was edited or the biomass was overestimated, and that's where actually the management board recommended a 50% reduction in total allowable harvest, but the board only adopted a 20% reduction. And that basically puts the total allowable catch at what it was prior to the previous term. And you'll see that there on my slide. All right. And you could just see in that map there, just showing where all these sets happen for the reduction fishing industry on the Chesapeake and off of the coast of New Jersey, which is where they catch this fish in federal waters. So one of the things that I looked at recently, when we take a look at ospreys and their productivity and just how they act as an indicator species of the landings of bait in New Jersey, which really reflects, their availability to ospreys. So here, this chart is just showing the bait landings in New Jersey over the years, and then compared to the osprey productivity. And we've not gotten data yet for 2025 from the state, but we hope to get that soon just to compare to see if there's any correlation. And I find it just to be interesting to see how it really has, changed over the years, where we've had ups and downs with, the osprey productivity, and you could see how the bait fishing industry has grown over the years as well too. So we're really curious to see how it looks for 2025, because I know from commercial fishermen who fish for bait in New Jersey that they haven't been able to catch fish over the last several years as much as they have in the past. All right, so when we look at the overall ecosystem and the management of the fishery, basically, ecosystem-based management is really, it takes it examines the overall role that, how predators respond to the abundance of this fish and how their health is, right? So ospreys really serve as a key indicator species of the either abundance or depletion of this fish within coastal areas where they reside. So one of the places where we've seen some really widespread impacts to ospreys is the Chesapeake Bay. This is considered to be the world's largest osprey colony with around 10,000 nesting pairs. So they really have broad implications for prey within this watershed because, if they're not able to reproduce and are unable to sustain the population, then that means that something is going wrong with the abundance of their prey. And one of their main prey has been Atlantic menhaden on Chesapeake Bay. So some of our colleagues and partners working down on the Chesapeake with the Center for Conservation Biology, they've conducted several studies over the years. They have research going back 40 years on the Chesapeake Bay. And one of their more recent studies, they actually did a prey supplementation study. This is where they actually put prey in osprey nests to look at whether they could be successful if there was enough food and compare with control nests. And what they found isn't surprising, and that's that if there wasn't enough food, then ospreys would more so fail to produce young as opposed to be successful in fledging young. So that's where nests where they did supplement prey had around an 80% success rate, and nests that didn't get prey only had about a 30% success rate. So when right now, the osprey population on the Chesapeake Bay not able to, to reproduce at a rate that is, sustainable for the population to continue to thrive. So ospreys, more just about them. So as I transition into my predator side of my talk, and I'm paying attention to time because I have a lot of slides and I could talk about ospreys all day. So even afterwards, if anyone doesn't get a chance to answer a question, then I'm always available via email or my phone number is on our website as well. But yeah, so ospreys are, a very large bird of prey. They're found along the coast where they build stick nests. So they play a great or very important role just because of how visible they are, in terms of being able to be researched and studied, and then show the effects of, whether there's abundance of prey or not. So, and that's where they also come back to the same nest site year after year. Females are larger than males. So if you see them on a nest, typically you're seeing the female more so than the male, and it's the male who does 100% of the foraging throughout the nesting season. And ospreys are one of the only species that can hover, and they plunge dive to catch their fish, meaning that they submerge their entire bodies to catch prey. And they are able to take off from water while holding this prey, which they carry head first to help, allow them to catch bigger fish and carry them longer distances to support their mates and their young. So yeah, so that's where I said that they return to the same nest site where they nest year after year. But their nests vary. So they nest mainly on nest platforms. Around 75% of the population in New Jersey nest on nest platforms, but they also nest on many different structures, sometimes right over water, on snags, or even on the ground. And they do still nest in trees as well, too. So their life cycle right now, ospreys are still returning to New Jersey. They mate for life and take separate vacations. So they lay up to 3 eggs, sometimes 4. This time of year is a really great time of year to go out and watch ospreys because you can see them, the male specifically, performing a courtship display called the sky dance. So that's where they do aerial display over nests, essentially showing off, sometimes with prey or nesting material, right over their nests. That's where typically then after that, if they're sprucing up their nests or building a new nest, they copulate during this time, strengthening their pair bond. And really it's the male and his ability to catch fish and provide it to his mate. And, that really helps strengthen their pair bond and set the stage for them to actually hatch young successfully. So the eggs are incubated a little over a month, up to about 42 days along the coast, where incubation takes a little bit longer just because it's colder. The young hatch asynchronously, which basically means that they hatch in the order that they're laid. And this is a natural adaptation of ospreys to basically account for prey and whether it's abundant or not, whereas it gives the oldest nestling a better chance to fledge as opposed to its younger siblings. So this is where a competitive advantage, takes form if there isn't enough food. And that's where the oldest young, as you can see in this picture, just showing, how there is a competitive advantage just in the size and development of young, especially in this nest where we see 4 young, where if there isn't enough food, then the youngest do have less chance of, successfully fledging because of that competitive advantage, where the older has, forms dominance over the younger siblings. All right, so now I'm going to kind of look back here at just the overall history of ospreys after going over their life history, which I'll talk more about, some of the current trends in a few. But if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, and I can get to them at the end. All right, but yeah, so ospreys, overall faced widespread declines from the late 1800s through to the after World War II. This is where they were persecuted, so they were shot for their feathers or their eggs were collected in early days. But it wasn't until after or around World War II that we were actively building along the coast. So habitat loss played a really negative impact on ospreys because that's where their nests were. They formerly nested on our barrier islands in trees and snags on these islands, and at the same time, we were currently exploiting menhaden along the coast. Like you remember, I showed like in the 1950s is when the harvest of menhaden peaked. And at the same time, we were also spraying DDT. So it was kind of the trifecta of impacts to ospreys, and this caused the population to decline from over 500 nesting pairs to around 50 pairs. All right, so the population totally collapsed. They were not able to sustain, their reproductive rate and the population, so it dropped significantly. All right, so DDT was banned both in New Jersey and federally in the late 60s and early 1970s. It was Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, which highlighted the effects of DDT on many different birds, including peregrine falcons, bald eagles, ospreys, and even cardinals. So that's where after that, the Endangered Species Act was passed, and ospreys were listed as endangered. And this new Osprey Recovery Project was founded, where funding was appropriated for the management of these species and many other ones, like eagles and peregrine falcons. And eagles, we only had one nesting pair of eagles left at this time. And peregrine falcons were totally extirpated east of the Mississippi River from the same effects from DDT and habitat loss. But biologists like Pete McLean with the Endangered Species Program and later Kathy Clark, began working with partners in different states where they went to specifically nests on the Chesapeake, with working with even U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS to collect eggs and young from nests there where DDT wasn't used as heavily, and then transplanted them to nests in New Jersey. And this is basically to jumpstart the reproduction of ospreys again, hopefully after DDT washed out of the ecosystem as it wasn't used as heavily, with the hope that those young birds, if they were eventually fledging from nests here and returning as adults then to nest. So also what was done to help with that was nest platforms were beginning to be installed in areas where they weren't being developed. So this happened a lot on our coastal marshes where there wasn't human disturbance, and ospreys were able to thrive in these areas as well. So, and really to assess the population of ospreys, aerial surveys were conducted to look at the overall distribution and outcomes of nests. So it really provided a great tool for getting or surveying large areas to be able to assess the overall health of the population. But ground surveys were also done, and this is where biologists went out to nests by boat and climbed up to them with ladders to look at the number of young produced, and then some of those young were banded as well. And over the past several decades, really the past 50 years, the osprey population has grown exponentially. The population status was upgraded to threatened in 1985, where the population doubled to about 100 nesting pairs. More nest platforms were installed for them along the coast, many by homeowners who are concerned about them, which has really been a great tool or asset for ospreys to nest in areas away from humans as well, where they can still thrive. And by the early 90s, the population doubled again from 100 to 200 nesting pairs, and we're expanding inland and in other areas where historically they did not nest as much, especially in areas like the Delaware River, where now we see more birds nesting on human infrastructure like communication towers. So in more recent years, we've seen the osprey population do very well. So they were actually delisted last year. The final aerial survey for them was conducted in 2009. That's because they've continued to thrive in recent years. But over the past several years, we've seen the effects of coastal storms, specifically in May and June, impact the availability of their main prey, menhaden. So where ospreys nest today, so they're found pretty much all along the coast of New Jersey, anywhere from the Meadowlands and Sandy Hook south to Cape May, and then along the Delaware Bayshore, mainly lining our coastal rivers and estuaries in many of these brackish water estuaries, and that's where the majority of them nest on nest platforms. So what we do to manage and monitor ospreys, so this is where we conduct nesting surveys every year to assess the overall health of the population. This is by conducting surveys for them. So myself and a core group of volunteers go out by boat. We're the only crazy people with ladders on our boats, and we go out to nests and determine if they're occupied or not, and then look at the outcome of nests. And then a portion of young are banded. In more recent years, we've relied more on citizen scientists to actually collect nest data through observations of nests. So this is where this other website here called Osprey Watch through the Center for Conservation Biology was founded, and we were one of the first groups to publish all known osprey nests in the state. So this is where anyone can sign up on this website and use a map to go and see nests all throughout the state and then can report nest activity. So, and this is one of the things that we're definitely going to be expanding this year to try and get more volunteers to cover more areas of the coast of New Jersey. All right, otherwise we use ladders. Like you can see here, this is actually right behind the foundation to climb up to nests and see what is going on, how many young they produce. But of course, this one, we're not just looking to see how many young, we're banding those young for future tracking, which we've done over the past several years with red bands, which I'm not really talking too much about today, but because I'm talking more about their prey. But we also use other methods like cameras that we can easily stick up in the nests, which allow us to get a quick little glimpse of what's going on while reducing disturbance, which is, of course, causing the adults, females or males, to fly around and stay off the nest while we're there. But it still allows us to look at the contents of the nest, whether they're eggs or nestlings, and then leave the area much quicker than using ladders. All right, and we could also really look at the prey that they're bringing to nests by examining prey remains left on the marsh. And we see a lot of these, which are the operculums of menhaden at nests under perches. And this is where the males generally feed after they return to their nest site with prey. So that's where we can find these at their nests. All right, so some of the troubling trends that we've seen over the past few years has been a shift from more symmetric broods, which are broods or nestlings that are very close in size and development, to more asymmetric broods, which are young that are different age classes or size classes, meaning that they're developing at different rates. And this is a sign of food stress within the population. And we're also hearing from both, recreational fishermen and commercial bait fishermen, specifically around Long Beach Island and the middle of the coast, that, the adult menhaden are not here or not as abundant in our nearshore waters. And we're seeing the number of nest failure rates as well grow very greatly. Just last year, the nest failure rate was over 50% of nests that we surveyed last year that failed to produce young. And if we compare that to previous years, we only had about 15% of nests that we surveyed fail to produce young. All right, so an example of an asymmetric brood. So you can see here, this is just one from last year, actually. This is from Sedge Island, not too far from Long Beach Island, right along the coast. So here we could just see that the nestling in the middle, of course, is much smaller than its other siblings, which are only a couple days apart in age. But we can just see that those larger nestlings have a competitive advantage over that younger one. And if there isn't enough food, then that younger one is not going to survive. And really, this already illustrates that food stress is apparent in this nest because that one is much smaller. And we could even see some of the feathers missing on the top of its head. And actually, I know the outcome of this nest, and it did only fledge too young. So that youngest one did not survive. And this is a brood reduction, as we call it, that occurred there. And then a symmetric brood. So this is one from several years ago. So this is a brood where the young are very close in size, where you can barely tell the difference between each individual, even though they're several days apart in age. This just means that they're all getting enough food in the nest for them to be well nourished and not compete with each other to, have this hierarchy in the nest as well. And this is a sign that food is, not an issue at this nest. All right. So Now I just have some examples from our Barnegat Light Osprey Cam, and this has really been a great tool for us in New Jersey to really, look at, prey specifically that's brought into the nest and comparing it to the outcome and the experience of the male, where this year, if he returns, will be 20 years old. So I'm going to kind of breeze through these because I don't want to waste too much time. But for any of you who followed the Barnegat Light Osprey Cam, you're obviously pretty aware of the results there. Or if not, we have past archives from the nest that we go into these kind of discussions. But 2020 was the first year we started this prey study with a researcher who was looking at osprey cams all throughout the world to compare to food stress within certain populations and how it related to nest outcomes. All right, that year was not a bad year. We had no coastal storms. Prey was plentiful, three young fledged. The following year, we had two young fledged. Prey again was not really an issue. And this was even with a new female. So, and typically we see some issues sometimes when you might have a new pair bond at a nest, but definitely not a factor that year. And then in 2022, we had a coastal storm in May. This is where two young did still fledge that year, but prey was still not really that much of an issue because the two young did still fledge that year. And then in 2023, we had another coastal storm. This is a nor'easter with high winds and wave action, causing more turbidity along the coast and just more difficult for males to forage, especially in the ocean. And that's where menhaden are mainly found. And that year, Duke actually was gone for 72 hours. So he disappeared from the nest. And that year, when that happened, when he returned, he found that two of his young did not survive. They died, and he experienced brood reduction at his nest. And then in 2024 was a very odd year where the female did not even lay any eggs. And this is something that we've never really seen before. And when we started looking into this more, and we're going to reach out to one of our colleagues down in the Chesapeake working with ospreys down there. They actually reported seeing this same thing happen down there, where we know ospreys have been more greatly affected by scarcity of menhaden in the Chesapeake. And now we were seeing the same examples as well. And basically, females not laying eggs like this means that they're not getting to egg laying condition from a lack of prey. All right. There's nothing else that would cause them to not lay eggs like this. All right. So then last year was the worst year that ospreys have had in recent history, and that was observed through our Barnegat Light Osprey Cam. We watched it happen firsthand. This is where the male Duke disappeared again for close to 70 hours right after this nor'easter, and his eggs were predated by a gull. All right. So he did not produce any young. So now knowing that, we've seen the impacts of these coastal storms, we really wanted to understand how it affects osprey outcomes throughout our survey area, which is Barnegat Bay. So that's where we went out and did egg count surveys. This was right around when this nor'easter hit. We went out and surveyed nests as soon as possible to really assess the overall population by looking at how many eggs were in nests, so then we could return and see what was the outcome at these nests. And what we found was that from the nest that we surveyed, which you can see here was around almost 25 nests, when we went back, we only had three nests that produced only four young. So very, very low productivity. And what we found was that many, many nests within our survey area on follow-up surveys were completely abandoned. Like this nest here, for example, we surveyed on May 23rd. The female was incubating. Then when we went back 3 weeks later, the nest was totally abandoned, but it still contained three eggs. So that the adults just totally abandoned the area because of a depletion of their primary food source. And this was the case throughout many, many different areas along the coast, especially on Barnegat Bay where we survey, but it was also reported in many other areas by our volunteer surveyors all along the coast. And this is evident in many pictures of nests like this. So this is another nest which actually had young. And then on return surveys, we saw nothing besides unhatched eggs, which is another sign of food stress here, where even the eggs aren't being eaten by predators. All right, and in one colony as well, another great example here of something that we wanted to look at because we had eagles take over an osprey nest. And this is something that has never happened in an osprey colony in this area. This is inside Sedge Island, which is New Jersey's most densely populated osprey nesting colony. This is where we have around 40 nesting pairs that nest. So ospreys kind of get a communal defense from birds like eagles when nesting in colonies. But so what we did is we surveyed nests within the sedge colony early on to do egg counts, and then obviously we returned later to see outcomes at those nests. And you'll see here just in this map that all the nests that are black failed to produce young. They all failed. And the only ones that did have young were the ones that are orange. So we only had four nests that produced five young total. So very, very dismal results. Typically, this Sedge Island colony in previous years, we've seen them produce 50 young for comparison. And one of the things that we really found was, that this colony did not even hatch hardly any young. They all failed very early in the season. Typically, this was observed right after this nor'easter that impacted the coast and the scarcity of their prey that followed. And it really didn't have anything to do necessarily with the eagles nesting in the colony because the results that we saw in this colony were the same as all of the surrounding areas where nests were also abandoned all throughout Barnegat Bay for the most part. All right, so the Sedge Island colony here, so this is where you could just see the overall results over the past, 20 years and how they've done fairly well up until the last year there that you could see where they reproduced at a level that is not sustainable for the population. All right, so I'm trying to get to a close here, but this is one little case study that I had to really look at and include here because since I've worked with ospreys so long, I try not to go down rabbit holes, but this is one that I really wanted to look at because this is a year. So this is comparing 2015 and 2025. In 2015, we actually had a very rare phenomenon where a very large school of menhaden got trapped on the Mullica River, which is a river in central New Jersey between Atlantic County and Burlington County. And this is where we had around 13 pairs of ospreys that nested in 2015. The population has grown somewhat. And back then, they produced around 20 young. And then if we compare it to last year, when prey was obviously not as available, they produced only 11 young. And their productivity rate, which is a measure of the health of the population, was only around half of what it was in 2015, uh, which is a year where prey was very rich that year. And one of the things we could really look at with that as well, too, how I mentioned the asynchrony and synchrony of broods, right? So this is an example of both a nest on the left from 2015 and then a nest from 2025, where this is a clear indication of food stress within the population when we see nests like this on the right-hand side of that that dominance of the older nestling outcompeting its younger one. And really, you could even see some of the feathers missing on top of its head, where there's that dominance over it by the older sibling, and that's competing directly for food. And we didn't see that in 2015, as you could see with the picture of those three young that are very close in size and development. All right. So results last year, this is all going to be coming out in our Osprey Project report, hopefully next week. So that's where ospreys reproduced at the lowest level ever recorded in the history of the Osprey Project. So we recorded around 50% of nests failed in New Jersey, and brood sizes are becoming much smaller. We're seeing more brood sizes with only one nestling as opposed to three, and that productivity rate, or the 0.69, is below the level needed to sustain the population, which it should be around at least zero point 0.8 or above. All right. Okay, so now some of the closing thoughts here, and then happy to take some questions. But yeah, so we're seeing brood reduction become more common, right? So this is a clear indication that food stress is apparent within the population. Menhaden have been reported to be more scarce along the coast of New Jersey. So some of the things that we're going to be doing is monitoring nests more closely. So we're going to be recruiting more volunteers. So if any of you want to get involved, we have a form on our website where you can sign up. All you really need is a pair of binoculars, a spotting scope, or a camera to record nest observations. And even if you don't live in New Jersey and you're watching this, you could be doing this anywhere because it's very important to know how ospreys are doing. And we're also going to be looking at males and their, specifically banded males. And those are ones with red bands where we can identify them and we know their age. And that's where we can then look at or compare their age or experience with their outcomes, right? So sometimes we can really look at how old individuals are and match that with their apparent experience, right? We would think that more experienced individuals are more successful at catching fish and caring for their young. So now we could really look at, you know, are older individuals, even like Duke at our Osprey Cam, are they more successful? Or is that not the case just because there isn't enough food to sustain them, where they're still not able to, reproduce? And also, what we're doing is working with partners to share our nest data, specifically the productivity rate and the observations we're seeing with other states and fisheries managers and policymakers, because they make decisions that affect many species. I mean, what we're seeing with ospreys right now, it's not concerning about them, but the fact that they're not able to sustain their populations, like in the Chesapeake Bay, has very widespread implications for the many other species that rely on menhaden to survive, like our whales, our tuna, our striped bass, our bluefish, and many other waterfowl that depend on different life stages of menhaden. And really, we don't know what's going on. But this is more a question for fisheries managers, to really look at the overall health of the stock of menhaden and, really make sure that they're, being regulated in a sustainable manner. All right. So if anybody has any questions, I don't know if, so thank you all for joining me today. I know it's a busy day, but let's see, I can even bring up the chat too. Or I don't know if anybody wants to raise your hand and maybe Jenna can
Yeah, and
uh,
Ben,
un
that was
unmute.
fantastic. Thank you. Sorry, I was late. I was listening in. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. This is one of the largest groups that we've had tune into, Ben. So I think we know that you have a pretty good following too. I learned a lot. I know others have
Right.
too. And there are a lot of questions in chat here. So maybe we can take one at a time here. Going
Sure.
to the top. A question, are you seeing osprey populations shift to areas where there's more fish to eat?
Yeah. So they can't really shift where their nests are. They have a very high level of site fidelity. I mean, one of the things that we saw, and this is another reason for having more people out there watching what's going on, even in inland areas. I know last year I had several people report that they were noticing more ospreys on inland lakes. Because, yeah, like I wondered, just about adult survival if there wasn't enough food for sure. So yeah, I think that they will leave, right? If there isn't enough food, then they will leave an area to look for other food, but they won't necessarily just be able to go and nest somewhere else. They'll still come back. Like even birds that left last year to find other areas to forage after their nest failed, then they'll still come back to their nest, until they die or perish as an adult, either on migration or in their wintering areas.
Wow. Most of these chats are just saying thank you so much. What a great job. You're a wealth of knowledge. They follow you. They learn a lot from you. Um, we agree. Let's see. Have we supplemented any nets to provide fish to help them survive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that even with folks who've watched like the Barnegat Light Osprey cam, and I was going to respond to a question about that too from Dave, so maybe I'll even follow up with that. But yeah, so that's we can't really, and it's something that's always very difficult to watch, right? Especially where you have a nest cam. I mean, even last year, I didn't really, talk about this, but at every single nest cam in New Jersey, except for two, they all failed to produce young as well. So the nest cams are a really great way to really get a live view of what's happening in real time to ospreys all along the coast and even everywhere else that they nest. But yeah, we, even if we would feed some nests, or supplement prey, it's not sustainable, so it's something, like I'd love to do because I hate seeing baby ospreys die, but we just can't do that, And for anyone who's wondering about the Barnegat Light Osprey cam, the camera was damaged during the blizzard. We actually have a GoFundMe going on right now too to help purchase a new camera, which we're hoping to install next week as well. So it will be online soon. But I have heard that I don't think that the birds have been back yet too. So
Okay.
it's still pretty early.
Is the GoFundMe campaign still active?
It is. Yep. Yeah.
Hey,
Just got launched this morning. So
Ben, are you
yeah.
able to drop the link in chat? And then also in answer
Yeah.
to one of the questions that came up about will this talk be available and will this be taped?
Mhm.
Jenna, I think I saw a note that this is being recorded, and I believe that we do put all the recordings up on the LBIF Science Saturday website. Is that right, Jenna?
Yep, that's correct. It will be posted on the LBIF YouTube page, and there will be a direct link on our website as well.
Great. Okay.
And you can find all past recordings from this season and last season as well on our YouTube channel.
And Jenna, do you think it would be possible to send an email to everybody who registered for this talk? And Ben, you can give us the GoFundMe link there too, assuming Jenna is going to answer yes to the question. Is it possible we can email them with a link to the recording once it's up on YouTube?
Absolutely.
Okay, and a link to Ben. We'll be in touch with you to see whatever links you want us to send out to everybody, so we don't have to copy and paste everything in chat. But it would be good to put the. Oh, there
That
it
would
is.
be great. Oh, yeah,
I
it'll
put it
be
in there
included
too, and
all
I
in that
saw
email.
Mary Ann put it. So
Excellent.
yeah, yep.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Okay.
Any other questions? What do we got? Yeah, thank you everyone. I see all the kind words of support. Much
Yeah.
appreciated, much appreciated. And we're trying to do everything we can here, to really learn what's going on. I mean, and we don't really know what's happening. So it could be the combined effects of, climate change or warming waters, pollution, and the fishery, right? They're not, they're fishing within the regulatory body, so that's, they're doing what they're allowed to do, and both for bait fishermen in New Jersey and the reduction fishery, but they I would think should be concerned as well too if they're actually not able to catch their quotas and everything too, or having to catch more individuals as opposed to larger individuals as well too that would make up more of their quota.
Ben, two quick questions for you. One, and then maybe they're related. One is in a low food supply, has it ever been tried to remove the runt, quote unquote, of the nest to try to raise it in a sanctuary setting? And a related question, I think, is
Mhm.
to do with the number of, let's see, how many nestlings need to survive to sustain the osprey population before it becomes a real threat?
Yeah, so yeah, like as much as I'd love to not see, younger nestlings starve to death, like even last year was very difficult, even watching that on some of the live cams, like at Island Beach State Park, the Pete McLean cam, it's again something like ospreys just don't do well in captivity. So even if we would take some of the younger nestlings and put them, in a rehabilitation setting where they're hand reared, then you just have to worry about them, being released and fledging. Because I was thinking about that too, because I saw many nests where nestlings perished over time. They starved to death because the adults abandoned them, from this food stress that we saw. But then you have to worry them as adults, right? Or even as juveniles, right? Like if there's not enough food to sustain them, then we're going to see the population decline. And this is already what's being observed in the Chesapeake as well. I mean, they had data that went back so far, decades. I think it was like 40 years for at least one colony that used to be on the eastern shore of Virginia. They have declined by 90% over the past 40 years. So we're going to see ospreys decline in overall numbers if the productivity rate continues to stay where it is. And that's where, I didn't really talk too much about it, but ospreys and other birds of prey, they have very high mortality rates. And this is one of the reasons why they need to be productive because, they have many threats. You think about these birds that migrate thousands of miles, right? Their migration every year is over 3,000 miles, depending on where they winter. And they have many threats along the way, whether it's from, being shot on some islands in the Caribbean or over fish farms in Colombia. And then now we have issues just with food stress here as well too. So, but yeah, and knowing how many young they need, I mean, we know like their, that productivity rate, which is the average of number of young produced per active nest needs to be above zero point 0.8 or around one nestling per nest. So, so we need to be around that for sure to, or to see the population be sustainable.
Mhm. We have a question for Jenna about the timing for posting this to the website. And then I have a follow-up with Ben for Ben, if you want to drop in a link and we'll share it as well of how people can get involved. I heard you mention that, which is very exciting. I bet about a lot of people here would like to be part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can drop a link to our website on our volunteer page where we have a form, where we have, people can sign up, to get information about volunteer sessions that we're going to have. So I'm planning to have one in the next couple of weeks. So here, I'm just going to drop it in the chat if anyone wants to see it. And this is where, yeah, we're going to have volunteers going out to nests to make observations, typically once per week at a nest to, look at what's going on, right? Are there birds or no birds? Are they incubating? Or do they eventually have young when we get to, that time of year, which is usually in June and July. So,
Okay. Well, I copied that link. I hope others have too. The recording will be posted on the LBIF YouTube channel on Monday. And Jenna, would you mind dropping that in chat? And we'll also include that when we send out a follow-up email. Any final questions for Ben? Thank you for hanging on a little bit longer. Thank you, Ben, for
yeah,
another
thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
good talk. It's just incredible, and it's so important. Not that just you're doing this work and your team is doing this work, but that you keep us all informed on what's happening out there too. So we'd love to support your work, and thank you
Oh,
everybody for
yeah.
coming in. Thanks, Ben.
Yep. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Darlene. Everyone, have a
Yeah.
good
Have a good day,
weekend.
everyone.
Thank you.